She was the most forgettable woman in the room. That was the most dangerous thing about her. The chart hit the floor before Adaeze Obi's fingers even registered it had slipped. The plastic clipboard cracked against the linoleum with a sound sharp enough to make the nearest intern flinch. She bent slowly, her thick locks swaying forward, her movements carrying that particular quality she had spent 3 years cultivating. Hesitant, slightly clumsy, perpetually apologetic. Like someone still learning to take up space in a world that hadn't asked for her. Under the sterile blue-tinted lights of Meridian General's main lobby, she looked tired. Her dark brown skin caught no shine, deliberately. Her 5 feet 7 inches frame swallowed by oversized standard-issue scrubs the color of faded sky. No jewelry except a simple watch on her left wrist, positioned with purpose to cover the faint reticle tattoo inked there years ago in a forward operating base in Kandahar. A marking her spotter Rodriguez had called her second heartbeat. "Jenkins, are you physically incapable of holding a clipboard?" Dr. Callum Marsh's voice cut across the lobby like a blade hitting bone. He was the type of man who mistook volume for authority, early 50s, silver-templed, built on the assumption that every room he entered had been waiting for him. He checked the gold Rolex on his wrist the way other men checked their reflection. Constantly. Compulsively. "I swear to God, if you spend any more time dropping things you'll qualify for your own patient file." Adaeze didn't look up. She kept her eyes fixed on the chart, her jaw tight. She didn't tell him that while he was performing his daily theater of dominance, she was calculating the air displacement from the lobby's vac vents, clocking the tactical blind spots around the revolving doors, and noting that the security guard at Station 2 had already fallen asleep 3 minutes ago. She didn't tell him any of that. She just said, quietly, "I'm sorry, Dr. Marsh. Won't happen again." Doubtful. He turned to his cluster of interns, all of them wearing matching expressions of practiced deference. Some people are simply not built for high-pressure environments. Take note. He smoothed his white coat with the satisfaction of a man who had never once doubted himself and began to walk away. Adaeze's jaw tightened by exactly 2 millimeters. Invisible to anyone not watching for it. Under her watchband, the tattoo itched. The ghost stirred. She had other names. In the DSS dossiers that had been officially shredded 3 years ago, she was WRAITH. In the field, Rodriguez had called her Ada. In mission briefings, she had been described as the most naturally gifted long-range shooter in the West African Rapid Response Unit's recorded history, before being seconded to a joint NATO task force that technically didn't exist. She had operated in 6 countries across 2 continents before she was 29. She had taken 31 confirmed shots. She had missed 0. Now she was a nurse. And she wanted to stay that way. The tires screamed first. Then glass. The ambulance bay windows detonated inward in a cascade of reinforced safety panels, the kind rated to resist a car impact at 40 miles per hour. Adaeze had clocked the sound before the shards finished falling. Breaching charges. Half-pound DET cord minimum. That meant pre-planning. That meant this was not a robbery. Dr. Marsh turned toward the sound with the expression of a man whose primary problem was inconvenience. What on earth? Adaeze was already moving. 4 strides to the nurse's station, fingers finding the panic button under the desk before her eyes had even confirmed its location. She pressed it 3 times. Nothing. Not even a click. She pressed it again. The system was cold. Dead. Communications cut at the source. A professional team always kills comms first. She had done it herself, twice, in operations that no longer had paper trails. Everyone. Away from the windows. Now. Quietly. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried the particular frequency of someone who had given orders under mortar fire and had them obeyed. Nobody moved. They were all looking at Dr. Marsh. "Don't be theatrical, Jenkins," Marsh said. "It's probably a..." 6 men in black tactical gear poured through the breach. They moved with the low, purposeful economy of people who had rehearsed this room in their sleep. No shouting. No wasted motion. The lead operator put 2 suppressed rounds through the security station before the guard completed his reach for the radio. The sound was 2 flat, ugly cracks. Nothing cinematic. Just the noise of one life ending before it could become a problem. Adaeze read them in the first 3 seconds. Suppressed weapons, custom builds, no unit patches, balaclavas sealed at the collar. They had pre-cut sectors of fire, which meant they had a floor plan, which meant someone had given it to them. They moved around each other without verbal cues, the kind of non-verbal sync that only exists after years of shared deployments. Private military. Experienced. Expensive. They were heading for the elevators. Not spreading out to control the building. Heading for the elevators with one goal in mind. Nobody move, the lead operator said. His voice carried a Gulf Coast drawl, Mississippi or Alabama, coastal. Calm as a man ordering lunch. We're looking for Dr. Callum Marsh. Point him out and this ends in 5 minutes. Marsh went the color of old wax. His hands started to rise. The lead operator's eyes swept the room and locked. Recognition was immediate. He'd been briefed with photos, clearly. 2 men peeled off toward Marsh with mechanical efficiency while the remaining 4 controlled the space, rifles tracking across terrified faces in slow, indifferent arcs. Adaeze kept her head down. Hands trembling, she made sure they were trembling. Shoulders rounded. Eyes on the floor. Every muscle in her body broadcasting. Not a threat, not interesting, not worth a second look. She was very good at this particular performance. She had survived 3 blown missions on it alone. The operator who passed within 3 feet of her was young, mid-20s, eager in the way that new contractors always were before their first contract went sideways. His rifle muzzle pointed at the floor. Sloppy. She filed it. Inside, the ghost was already counting. Positions, distances, oxygen tanks near the elevator bay, 1 spark away from a crematorium. She needed these men out of the building, or she needed them neutralized. But not yet. She had 8 civilians between her and the nearest operator. She needed a clear line before she moved a single muscle that wasn't trembling. The lead operator keyed his radio. Package secure. Extraction in 5. Sweep the floor and clear witnesses who can move. Not no witnesses. Witnesses who can move. Adaeze's stomach dropped. They weren't planning a massacre. They were planning to kneecap anyone capable of pursuit, destroy comms, and leave a crippled building behind them. She had exactly 90 seconds before this became irreversible. She started to move. Slowly. Like a frightened woman crawling for cover. No one looked twice. She survived 3 wars by being invisible. Tonight, invisible wouldn't be enough. The rifle remembered her hands even after 3 years of forgetting. That was the problem with ghosts. They never actually left. The sub-basement smelled like disinfectant and old decisions. Adaeze moved through it the way she moved through every space she'd ever operated in. Reading corners, counting exit points, tracking the sound of footsteps filtering down through the concrete above her head. The mercenaries were still on the ground floor. She had maybe 4 minutes before extraction. The maintenance locker in the back corner of the equipment storage room had a broken lock. She had broken it herself during her first week at Meridian General. In the same quiet, methodical way she had catalogued every exit, every blind spot, and every load-bearing wall in the building. Not because she was planning for this. Because she was constitutionally incapable of not planning for this. The equipment case inside was military-grade polymer, matte black, designed to survive helicopter hard landings and desert heat. She laid it on the concrete floor and found the combination by feel alone in the dimness. 3 rotations. The case opened with a soft hiss, pressure equalization, and inside, cradled in foam cut to its exact geometry, was the only honest thing she owned. The rifle was a custom bolt-action built around a Remington 700 Action, .308 Winchester, 26-inch free-floating match-grade barrel. She had assembled it piece by piece over 2 years of weekend trips to a range in Abuja and 1 very focused month in Montenegro. The loopholed scope was zeroed to 800 meters. She had checked it 6 months ago. She had told herself it would never need to be used. Her hands assembled it in the dark anyway. Barrel to receiver. Bolt carrier. Scope mount. Each click of each component settling into place felt like a language she had never stopped speaking, no matter how long she had gone silent. She loaded 5 rounds, Sierra Match King 168 grain hollow points. loaded the first into the chamber, engaged the safety. She exhaled once, long and slow. The ghost settled into her like a second spine. The service stairs brought her to the third-floor radiology corridor in 90 seconds. She moved through the hospital's emergency-lit halls like smoke, the rifle held tight and low against her body, nursing shoes silent on the linoleum. Through the corridor window, she could see the main atrium. 4 stories of open space, floor-to-ceiling glass on the far wall, the reinforced triage desk on the ground level that she already knew would stop small arms fire for approximately 4 seconds. She dropped into position behind it and brought the scope up. The mercenaries were moving through the ambulance bay below, 4 men around Marsh, dragging him toward a black Suburban with run-flat tires and a chassis sitting 3 inches higher than standard. The lead operator was on point, sweeping externally. 2 men had Marsh by the arms. The 4th walked backward, covering their 6 with disciplined backward steps. Professional. Clean. Adaeze's breathing dropped to 8 per minute. Her heart rate followed. The reticle found the lead operator's right knee. She wasn't here to kill anyone if she could avoid it, and she was 2 pounds from the trigger when the second black Suburban in the outer parking lot opened its door. A man stepped out. She almost broke position. Almost. He was Korean, mid-30s, dressed in a charcoal suit that had cost more than most people's cars, and he moved with the deliberate, unsettling calm of someone who had long ago stopped being afraid of anything. Sharp jaw. Dark eyes that swept the ambulance bay with the flat, analytical precision of a man who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. He was flanked by 2 bodyguards who stayed a precise half-step back, trained, not just loyal. He hadn't come here afraid. He had come here to collect something. He was the one who had sent them. Adaeze's mind ran the calculation in under 2 seconds. Korean organized crime had 3 major syndicates with the operational budget to hire contractors of this quality. The Seonghwa Group, the Baek Network, and the Jong Organization. Only one of them had Western hospital access as a documented pressure point. The Baek Network, whose chairman, Baek Min-joon, had been in a territorial conflict with Dr. Marsh's Pharmaceutical Research Board for 18 months. The board had been blocking an illegal compound patent worth north of $300 million. Marsh wasn't a kidnapping target. He was leverage. She moved her reticle to Baek Min-joon. He turned his head, slowly, and looked directly at the 3rd floor. Not at the window. At the exact angle of her position behind the triage desk. He couldn't have seen the barrel. The distance was too great and the light was wrong. But he looked, directly and without flinching, for 3 full seconds, and then something crossed his face that Adaeze had not expected and could not immediately name. It wasn't recognition. It wasn't alarm. It was closer to interest. She pulled the trigger on the lead operator's radio pack instead of his knee. The shot was clean, 43 meters. The radio exploded off his tactical vest and he spun hard, grabbing for cover he hadn't expected to need. The team broke formation for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds was enough. Who is shooting? The lead operator's voice lost its Gulf Coast calm for the first time. He was scanning. They all were. Nobody was looking at an emergency exit on the east side of the ambulance bay, the one that Adaeze had already marked as unguarded when she'd catalogued the building on day 3 of her employment. She put her second shot through the Suburban's front left tire. Her third disabled the rear tire on the second vehicle. They had no exfil now. Their comms were compromised. And from Baek Min-joon's expression as he recalculated the situation from the parking lot, the man they'd hired to extract a hostage had just become a tactical liability. She watched him make a decision with his eyes before his mouth moved. He said 3 quiet words to his bodyguards. They lowered their weapons. "Stand down," the lead operator called to his team. His voice had the specific flatness of a man who understood when an operation had gone past the point of profit. "Abort extraction. We're done." Marsh collapsed to his knees on the ambulance bay floor, zip ties still on his wrists, openly weeping in a way that erased every sneer he had ever offered her. Adaeze watched from the 3rd floor as the mercenaries performed a controlled retreat. No running, no panic, just the quiet mechanical withdrawal of men cutting losses. She tracked them until they were beyond range. Then she looked back at Baek Min-joon. He was still standing in the parking lot. His bodyguards had already moved back to the car. He was looking up at the third floor with his hands loose at his sides and that same unreadable expression on his face, and Adaeze realized, with a cold drop in her stomach, that he was the only person in that parking lot who hadn't moved a single inch. He wanted to know who she was. She unassembled the rifle in 45 seconds and disappeared into the service corridor before the first police siren reached the parking lot. She had ended wars quieter than this one. But she had never been seen. Not like that. Baek Min-joon had purchased governments. He had never before wanted something he could not price. 3 days later, there were orchids on the nurse's station desk. White ones. Not the cheap kind from a hospital gift shop. The kind that arrived in a matte black box with no card, tissue paper folded in deliberate, geometric quarters, the roots wrapped in sustainable moss. Adaeze stared at them for a full 20 seconds before she picked up the box and read the single line printed inside the lid in clean, minimal font. "I know what you did. I know what you are. I'd like to discuss both over dinner. B." She put the box in the medical waste bin and went back to her rounds. The next morning, there was a single printed card on her windshield under the wiper blade. Not threatening. Not pleading. Just a time, a restaurant name, and 2 more words. "Please come." She ran a background search on Baek Min-joon that night, which took her 4 hours longer than it should have because whoever managed his digital footprint was genuinely excellent. What she found was the architecture of a careful man. Baek Network chairman, 36 years old, Seoul-born, educated at KAIST before 3 years of military service that had a suspiciously large gap in the official records. Officially, commodities and technology investment. Actually, the most disciplined criminal empire in East Asia, notable primarily for the fact that it had never, in 9 years of operation, been directly linked to a single civilian casualty. He wasn't clean. But he had lines. She had worked with men who had lines. She had also worked with men who didn't. She knew the difference. She went to the dinner. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lighting was doing most of the work. Adaeze arrived 7 minutes early, clocked all 4 exits and the 2 bodyguards positioned at the perimeter trying to look like patrons, and was seated before Baek Min-joon arrived. He walked in exactly on time, not early, not late, and the first thing he did when he sat down was look at her watch. "The reticle," he said. "Not a question." "You have good eyes," she said. "I had good intelligence. After the fact." He settled into his chair with the ease of a man who had been uncomfortable in many rooms and had decided to stop performing comfort. "I had 4 contractors who trained together for 6 months, and 1 Nigerian nurse took apart their exfil in under 90 seconds from a 3rd-floor position with a bolt-action rifle. My head of security has been in a bad mood ever since." "Your head of security should have swept the building properly," Adaeze said. He smiled. It was a small smile, private, like something he wasn't sure he'd intended to produce. "He agrees with you. He's been told as much." She studied him across the table. He was more striking up close than he had been through the scope, which was not a sentence she had expected to form in her life. Sharp angles in his face, the kind that came from a particular combination of genetics and whatever it was that life in high-stakes environments did to a person's features over time. His eyes were very dark and very still, and they didn't move off her face in the performative way that men with power usually stared at women. He was actually paying attention. It was mildly unsettling. "Why Marsh?" she asked. "He was obstructing a medical patent that has genuine applications in pediatric oncology," Baek said. "His board was blocking it for competitive reasons, not ethical ones. I wanted leverage, not a body. You could have filed litigation. I could have." He paused. It would have taken 4 years and cost 26 children their treatment window. She was quiet for a moment. "That's a very convenient justification for kidnapping." "Yes," he said simply. "It is. I'm not asking you to approve of it." The food arrived. Neither of them touched it immediately. The silence between them had a quality she hadn't felt in a long time. Not hostile, not performative, just 2 people who were accustomed to reading rooms sitting in one together. "What do you want from me?" Adaeze asked. "I haven't decided yet," Baek said. "Professionally, you're extraordinary. Personally," he stopped. Started again. "I haven't met someone I couldn't read in some time. I find I don't want to stop trying. I'm a nurse, she said. You're WRAITH, he said quietly. Former DSS Special Operations Secondment, Joint NATO Task Force Kilo, 31 confirmed shots, 0 misses. Officially retired 3 years ago after an operation in Tripoli that you've never told anyone about. He let that sit. I'm not saying that to threaten you. I'm saying it because I think you're tired of pretending to be smaller than you are, and I'd rather talk to the real one. Something tightened in Adaeze's chest. Not fear. Something older. The particular ache of being accurately seen by someone you hadn't given permission to look. You should be afraid of me, she said. I know, he said. I find that's part of the appeal. She left before dessert. He didn't try to stop her. The orchids came again the following Monday. Then a book, a first edition of a Wole Soyinka collection she had mentioned once, casually, to a colleague 3 floors away from anyone who should have been listening. Then nothing for a week, which she recognized immediately as the tactical move it was, retreat to invite pursuit, and she refused to pursue, and he showed up at Meridian General on a Thursday morning as a patient, with a laceration on his left forearm that had clearly been treated once already and reopened deliberately. She cleaned and sutured it in 4 minutes without speaking. He watched her hands the whole time with the focused attention he gave everything. You reopened this yourself, she said, tying off the last stitch. Yes. That's pathetic, she said. Deeply, he agreed. She almost laughed. She caught it before it fully arrived, but something in her face must have shifted, because he exhaled with the relief of a man who had been holding his breath for some time. There's a problem, Adaeze said, pressing a gauze pad to his arm with more pressure than strictly necessary. I spent 3 years building a quiet life. I'm very attached to it. I know, Beck said. I spent 9 years building an empire. I'm significantly less attached to it than I expected to be. She looked at him. He looked back. Outside the curtained bay, the hospital carried on its ordinary chaos, the rolling of gurneys, the PA system announcing codes, the distant sound of a child crying and then stopping. The ordinary sound of a place built to hold people at their most broken and send them back into the world repaired. She had come here to disappear. He had come here to collect a hostage and left with something considerably harder to manage. Dinner, she said finally. Somewhere I choose. I'm not sitting with your bodyguards in my sight line again. The corner of his mouth moved. Done. An Min-jun. She stripped off her gloves with 2 sharp snaps. The next time you send mercenaries into a building I'm standing in, I won't shoot the radio. He looked at her for a long moment, and the smile became something more complete, more honest, and surprisingly, devastatingly warm. I believe you, he said. That's the most attracted to anyone I've ever been. She walked out of the bay before her face could betray her entirely. At the nurse's station, she stopped, picked up the pen that had rolled to the edge of the desk, wrote 6 numbers on the back of a prescription slip and folded it twice. She left it under the corner of the orchid box that had arrived that morning, the one she had told herself she was going to throw away, and went back to her rounds. The ghost didn't scream to come out anymore. It just sat with her, patient and watchful, like it had always known this was where the story was headed. Not back to the silence of Kandahar. Not to the rooftops and the cordite and the names that became statistics. Here. Under fluorescent lights, in scrubs that never quite fit, in a life she had rebuilt one quiet shift at a time. And if Baek Min-jun was currently sitting in his car in the hospital parking lot reading 6 digits on a prescription slip with an expression his head of security would describe as terrifyingly soft, then that was between him and whatever version of himself had survived 9 years of building an empire and arrived, unexpectedly, at a hospital room curtain looking for something he couldn't purchase. She had been the most forgettable woman in the room. She had a feeling that part of the story was over. Some women retire from war. Some women just change the battlefield. And some men are smart enough to know when they've already lost. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and comment what you enjoyed most about this story and share to a friend that you would love to see this great video. By Familiar.